You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, Episode 11. In this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast, we're going to be joined by Larry Leutenegger, CEO of Patternmaster Chokes, and we're also going to introduce you to a new segment of the show where we profile a new duck every week. All right, we would like to welcome you to the 11th episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We've got a great show lined up for you this week. We're going to be joined by Larry Leutenegger, who is the CEO of Patternmaster Chokes, and he's going to come on the show and discuss with us, a lot of questions that folks have about choke tubes and some misconceptions, and kind of give us some guidance on things that we should consider when selecting choke tubes for our appropriate setups and all that kind of stuff. So got a good conversation coming up with Larry. And then, we're going to introduce a new segment to the show, and we're going to profile a duck, a different duck every episode for a while. And, this week we're going to start off with the most common of all ducks in the U.S. here, the mallard. So should be a good, little tidbit about one of the most popular ducks to hunt here in the States. Joining me for all of this conversation, as always, is my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing pretty well. Been checking out my 10-day forecast, and the end of next week, which happens to be the end of archery season, we're getting a little bit of an Arctic blast coming down. So it's going to be, one, good for archery hunting, and two, it's going to be pushing some birds down. So it doesn't get any better than this time of year right now.
Yep, it's going to time up perfectly here for the season in Virginia. Comes back in on 15 November. So, right in the couple days, before our season starts, that front's going to be coming through. So hopefully we'll get some new birds in the area. But you mentioned archery hunting, and I took my bow out for the first time this week, for the first time this season. Didn't do any good. Had a couple does around me, but it felt good to get back out in the deer woods. It had been a while, but unfortunately, a lot of the time that I'm in the deer woods hunting, I'm just thinking about duck and geese hunting and waiting for that season to come back. So it's a far cry from what I used to be. I used to be a diehard archery hunter, and now I've definitely changed over a little bit. But I know you've been spending some time in the blind deer woods as well.
Yeah, now that the time changed, I can make it out in the mornings, and this morning I passed up two 8 points. They're about 2.5-year-old, and just looking to go with a more mature deer in the coming years. So there's a couple around that I wouldn't mind getting a shot at, so I'm kind of holding out. But nothing yet. But the other day I was talking to you, and I said, man, I wish I was hunting some honkers right now, because it was windy and just a perfect day for bird hunting, but I chose the wrong way to go. So be it, but I'll get back after the birds here pretty shortly.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm super excited. It feels, we had the 4-day season here in Virginia in early October, and I just feel like it's been so long since I've had the chance to get back out there, but had some decoys come in and did some rigging there with those and all that kind of stuff. So I'm definitely chomping at the bit to get back, and I'm excited. So, 15 November can't come any sooner. So, but today's show is a good one because we've got something new that we're going to introduce to the show. We're going to introduce our mallard duck profile for this week, and we're going to basically just profile a different duck or goose every week for a while, and just sort of bring you some information about some ducks that you might know pretty commonly, and some ones that you may not know as much about. So a little bit of a learning opportunity. If you have a particular duck or goose that you'd like to hear us profile, give us a call, 724-609-FOWL, 724-609-3695. You can leave us a message on there, and we will try to review the birds that you guys want to hear about. You can also reach us at info@hpoutdoors.com on our website, Facebook, Twitter, all of that good stuff. Reach out to us there, and we'll go in the directions that you guys want to. But we figured that this week would be appropriate to start off with the mallard because it's one of the most popular ducks to hunt in the U.S. It's the most populated duck, and it's something that I think everybody can relate to a little bit, Dan, when it comes to seeing the green. Green heads coming in is just it's something special that most waterfowlers hold pretty dear.
Yeah, and I just want to start out by saying I'm excited about this segment just because a lot of the diver ducks I've never really hunted or had a chance to hunt, so learning a little more about them, I'm excited about that. But being that this is new, I'm gonna pop a question on you right now, and since we're starting with the mallard, so answer me this. What is the oldest mallard that has been reported via band information? The longest living mallard.
I've seen this somewhere. Boy, I can't remember. I might be getting this mixed up with the Canada goose, but I want to say it's in the neighborhood of like 30 years old or something crazy like that.
And you're not too far off. It's actually 26 years and 4 months old, which is
26 years.
Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that tells you a little bit, as to why it's the most populated duck, in the U.S. I mean, 26 years, good grief. There's a lot of miles on those wings and a lot of breeding cycles and that kind of stuff with that duck. So, it's awesome that, that there's opportunities for ducks to live that long. And it's amazing that bird can make it up and down the flyway year after year and evade all the hunters out there and stuff like that. So, awesome information. But since you seem to be our mallard expert here and have all the information, why don't you go ahead and get us started here with our mallard duck profile?
I would say I'm not an expert, but I will talk a little bit about the almighty greenhead here. All right, let's start with the male. A male, you're coming in at about 24 and a half inches and weighing 2.7 pounds. The female's not too far behind it. You're talking 23 inches, about an inch and a half shorter than the male, 2.4 pounds. The description of the male, obviously, it is very recognizable. You have the green head that, if you're on Facebook, you just see, it's time for green. I'm seeing green. It's, just the almighty duck. But has green head. It has a white ring around the neck. It kind of separates the green head and kind of a chestnut brown chest. You have some gray sides, a brownish back, and the speculum, which is always beautiful. It's a violet blue. It's bordered by black and white, and the outer tail feathers are white. It has a yellow to a yellowish green bill, and the legs, you always see pictures of the feet down, mallards landing. You're coming in, those have a coral red look to them. The male makes a creep sound, and if you ever watch Duck Dynasty, there's a lot of Duck Dynasty haters, but you see Phil calling on YouTube videos, and it's not real high like a tree frog, but it's a lower creep sound. Going on to the female, they make the sounds of the series of quacks, and that's what everyone, when they pick up a duck call, that's what they make, quack, 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 quack. They have a mottled brownish color, a violet speculum bordered by black and white. The head is a dark brown, has a dark brown stripe running through the eye, and the remainder of the head, it's pretty much all brown. It's a lighter brown, a little more light than the upper body, and then the bill on a female is the orange splotched with a little bit of brown, and the legs and feet of the female are a nice bright orange. And that's a little description of the mallard duck there.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that the male drake mallard makes the creep noise, and the female is the one that makes all the quacks. I don't think that everybody realizes that not both the female and the male make those quacks that you're imitating on a duck call. So that may be a little bit of a surprise to some folks out there. But,
yeah, one thing.
As I'd mentioned,
I was going to say one thing that I do enjoy doing when I'm out in a duck blind is making that creep sound, and it's almost, I don't know if I want to say it's a comfort sound, but knowing it's not the loud blasting quack, quack, quack all the time, but just more of a, a battleship just floating around down there making that sound. So I enjoy that. And, and it always, it seems to work quite often. So I do like using that call.
Well, it's an effective call because, the duck does make that noise in the natural environment. And it's not a call that a lot of guys in the field use. They're mostly just laying on the hen call, so using that mallard creep noise is an effective way to be a little bit different than what they're hearing at every blind they fly by as they go down the river. As I had mentioned, the mallard duck is the absolute most common duck in the United States. 2014 survey totals have the mallard at 10.9 million birds. Man, that's 5% higher than it was in 2013 and 42% above the long-term average for mallards. So the mallard population is absolutely just thriving right now. One of the reasons for that is because they've got the most extensive breeding range, of any duck in North America. Primarily in the U.S., it's the northern third of the U.S., but they also go all the way up to the Bering Sea. And, a female is going to lay an average of 9 eggs. So there's just a lot of opportunity for, great hatch and great success breeding there. Highest population densities for the mallard are going to be in the prairie pothole regions, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Manitoba, northern North Dakota, those areas of the U.S. Conversely, the same thing there with the height of the migration is going to take place for mallards in the Mississippi and the central flyways. But they are one of the latest fall migrants among all the dabbling ducks. You obviously are going to get your teal and ducks like that are going to move out ahead of the mallards. But they do have one of the longest, most extended migration. Some will start, as early as the late summer, and then they'll continue all the way into the masses, into the early winter. So a nice long flight for the mallards. And they typically feed on, seeds and rootlets and, various aquatic plants and things that they can find on the bottom of swamps and rivers and stuff like that. So, in general here, just, the mallard is one of those majestic ducks that all waterfowlers can quickly identify, quickly reference, one of the best table fare that you'll find out there, and one of the funnest ducks to hunt in general. So there's lots of information out there about mallards, but this is just sort of a quick little rundown of what the mallard duck is. All right, Dan, so we're going to be joined momentarily here on the show by Larry Leutenegger, who is the CEO of Patternmaster Chokes. And we wanted to have Larry on the show because Patternmaster Chokes are made in Pennsylvania. That's a home state for both of us, where we grew up, raised, used to live there. I get back as much as I can, but we wanted to talk to a local guy, then support the companies doing business in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And Larry has a lot of information, and he's a very knowledgeable guy when it comes to choke tubes and gunsmithing and things of that nature. So to have him on the show is really an honor and a privilege to have someone of his caliber and his quality of knowledge on the show. But we get a lot of questions about choke tubes and what should we be looking for, and what do you guys use, and all of these kind of things. So that's some of the stuff that we hope to be able to tackle when we get Larry on the line here.
Yeah, and I think choke tubes are very underrated, and guys getting into it just they don't know what to use, or they don't think about what to use, and kind of this has been working for me, or I'll go out and try it. But the more that I look into his site and what Patternmaster has going over there, there is a science behind it, and I'm excited to talk to him because it just seems like they're ahead of the game. And some of the things that you see on our website and Facebook page, like, it's pretty impressive. And I think that if you haven't checked them out, you definitely should.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you can search different forums, and everybody's got their company that they support and they think is better and all that kind of stuff. But, Patternmaster does some unique things with their choke tubes. So it's definitely an interesting concept that they have. And, he definitely opened my eyes to some things, that I didn't realize and I hadn't really considered when talking about choke tubes. So why don't we go ahead and get into that? And we're gonna have a chat with the CEO of Patternmaster Chokes, Larry Leutenegger. All right, we are excited to welcome Larry Leutenegger to the show. Larry is the CEO of Patternmaster Chokes. Larry, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for asking.
All right, well, we're glad to have you on the show. You're going to be able to answer a lot of questions for us that we get, onto the show here from our listeners about choke tubes and, making the right selections and, what all goes into the process of deciding which one's going to be best for, each person's situation and all of that good stuff. So we're really glad you're here. And, kind of generally to get started with the conversation here, I'd like you to talk to us a little bit about, some of the factors that waterfowl hunters should consider when they're picking a choke tube. I mean, I think a lot of guys, they might get a gun handed down to them from their dad, or they may buy one used that's got a choke already in it, and maybe they just go with it because that's what's already there, and they may not know exactly why they're, which ones they should be choosing. So talk to us a little bit about some of the factors that a guy should consider when he's, picking out a choke tube.
Well, when they first started, they passed a law about having to use a steel shot, it kind of changed the game somewhat. Because the steel, it doesn't carry like lead does because it's not as heavy. But there are choke tubes out there that will shoot the steel every bit as good as the lead. I've talked to a lot of people when I go to shows and stuff, and they say, well, that lead just doesn't, or the steel just doesn't bring them down. So many of them get away. Well, mostly because of the choke tube. It's just not holding things together and hitting them like, to bring them down. The waterfowl is a very, very hard thing to bring down.
Yeah, I mean, I think, using steel in itself has its challenges. And, I think that's why, the choke is so vitally important for the waterfowler specifically, who doesn't have the benefit of using lead. So take us through some of the things that make the decision so important. Obviously with a company like yours, you guys have a ton of time and research put into, different prototypes and things to find out what works the best, what doesn't, all of that sort of stuff. So talk to us a little bit about, the selection process of the choke tube and just why that is so important for a hunter.
Well, the big thing about our product, or most all of our products, is we totally look at constricting shot differently than they've ever done before, because everybody has always used constriction to try to tighten patterns. Well, that's good, but it's like pouring sand in a funnel. Everything can't pass through at the same time. So in your shotgun, what happens is your shot string can get strung out over 20 feet. Well, if you're shooting at something stationary, it's not really a big deal. But when you're shooting something that's flying or moving, and you have 20 feet of shot string, even if you hit it, you wasted so much more of your pattern than what you used. So you end up with a lot of cripples flying away and things like that. Now, the way that we control it, we don't use constriction to control the pattern. Inside of our Patternmasters, we have a series of 5 little blocks, or studs is what we call them. And as the wad comes through carrying the shot, and the base of the wad will catch for a fraction of a second on the base of the wad, allowing all that shot to go out at the same time. So we're able to take 20 feet of shot string, and we're able to condense it down to about 3 to 3.5 feet. So now, when you have something flying and moving like that, you hit, but you hit with almost all of your pattern. Now, if you're not a real good shot, or you either hit it or you miss it. You know what I mean? But you don't get the cripples. Most people, when they buy a choke tube, first thing they want to go out is shoot it on some paper and see how it does. Well, that's fine if you're, like turkey hunters or things like that. But that can show you the tightness or the density of your pattern. But if it's stretched out over 20 feet, you're still not using all that pattern, even though it shows you that on paper. Now, the way that we found that we could test ours to prove that it's actually doing what we say it does is we shoot it over water. And I know all of those waterfowlers out there have shot a duck or a goose and brought it down, and it swims around in the water, and you shoot at it out there, and it keeps swimming, and you shoot at it, and you shoot at it, and if you're shooting some of that ammunition, that's $3-4 a shot. So it gets very costly to try to chase that duck around. But we have something on our website showing a regular constriction type choke shot across water, and then one of our Patternmasters shot across water, and it's like night and day. When you shoot it with a Patternmaster, it just goes whoomp all at one time right there where the duck is, and you don't swim away anymore.
I think everybody would like a few less cripples to chase around, especially when you got birds trying to work your spread and stuff. So I never really thought about it like you just described it, though, and it's a really interesting point because it makes a lot of sense to me when you're patterning a shotgun for a turkey, being standing there in one spot where when you've got a duck or a goose flying side to side or parallel to you, you don't necessarily get to use all of that shot. So that's a really interesting point, and nothing, something that I've never really considered. So that's definitely a different way of thinking, which kind of obviously lends itself to the your style of product that you guys offer. So really great point with that.
Yeah. So Larry, let me ask you, when guys are going out to select a choke, what are some of just common mistakes that people are making? I know there's a ton of misinformation out there on the internet, or you might just be talking to a friend that has a certain choke that he might like, so you go with him. But what are some mistakes that people make, or what's a good way about going and picking out the correct choke?
Well, if you're the way that we categorize our Patternmaster and our Code Blacks are our extended range is normally for distances 70 yards, 80 yards, way out there. So if you're shooting at them way up there, you're sky busting them. Something like that would be what you'd want. Now, if you're coming in a little bit closer, 60 yards, 50 yards, we make a long range. And the long range is probably our most versatile. And that's because our stud system is placed inside that choke in such a way so when the base of that hits, the front of the wad is flush with the front of the tube if you're shooting 2 3/4 or 3-inch shells. So it keeps it together and gives you a full to an extra full pattern. Now, if you shoot a 3.5-inch shell in there, you have a wad that's going to stick out about a 1/2 inch out the end of the tube when the base of the wad hits the studs. So that turns that more into like a modified because it allows that 1/2 inch of shot to open up in a bigger area as it exits, but still it takes the wad away and keeps your shot string very short. And the next one we have is our mid-range, which mid-range is going to take you in between where the long range and the short range takes you. And that'll be probably 50, 40 yards. And then we have our short range, and we also have, it's also called over decoy, which some of the hunters have named it that. It's also called pigeon and timber. But it's the same tube. It's just depending on where we're selling it and what the hunters would relate it to in that area. But the way that it works, we don't change the inside of our tubes to change the size of the pattern like a regular constriction tube would. The way that we do it is we cut the front of the tube back toward that stud ring. Our extended tube is real long that sticks out the front of your barrel. As we cut it back, the long range, then it makes it full to an extra full with a 2 3/4 inch. And like I just described, with the 3 1/2, that would turn it into a modified. Now to bring it back we bring it back a little step farther, and that allows more wad to stick out the front, allowing it to go in a bigger circle, but still keeping that shot string very short and dense. So just like it keeps building a wall bigger that hits it all at once. And then when you get to the short range, which we have a lot of hunters, that's all they use is just the short range because it carries so far that and hits them so hard, and it allows you a bigger area. You know, you have a more of a fudge factor with it.
Right. So that's and for our listeners out there, Patternmaster has, you know, they named their own. An improved cylinder would be like their short range, and their modified is their mid range. So, Larry, let's talk about how much of a difference is there between, say, your short range and mid range, and mid and long, and the pattern density that that hunters should expect at common yardages. And I mean, it's just listening to you, I know that you have just a ton of science behind everything, and it's pretty nice to hear.
Well, normally it's kind of an industry standard that they test at 40 yards with a 30-inch circle, and then, you know, you split up and count your BBs in there. With our full and extended tubes, well, I'll go to the extended tube first. I mean, normally when we shoot that at 40 yards with the steel, now it depends on ammunition. Some ammunition shoots better than others, and some ammunition will shoot better in this gun than it will in this gun. And you know, it's very ammunition sensitive on a lot of guns, but normally you can expect to be probably in the 89 to 95 percentile range with the extended. And if you're shooting 2 3/4 or 3-inch, you're going to get that probably out of our long range. Now, as you come back to the mid range, you're going to be down probably around 80%. And when you get back to the short range, you're probably around between 70 and 80. So, I mean, that's still very, very tight for a tube.
So you've touched on something that I wanted to get into, and hopefully you'll be able to shed a little insight on this. But you mentioned how different, various ammo brands can pattern through the same gun and that kind of thing. Obviously, that's one of the biggest reasons why people want to pattern their gun, to find out which load's going to, group the best with their particular shotgun and choke setup, that kind of thing. Can you shed any light as to why that is? You know, what is it about the ammo that they, that causes it to be so erratic from brand to brand?
Well, when you're talking firearms, it's not an exact science. Okay, firearms are funny that way. I mean, I've seen people that we've sold tubes to, and for instance, like in a Remington 870, and he's getting 89%, and then you give it to his buddy, and he screws that same tube in his gun, and he's only getting about 78%. And they're shooting the same ammo, pretty much the same gun. They're both shooting 870s, but just from one barrel to the next. I mean, and the barrels don't vary, but 1,000, 2,000 from the same brand barrel from one to the other. Now the dimensions do change as you go to different shotguns, because where a Remington would be about 730 thousandths inside the barrel dimension, and a Benelli might be 720, 28, and a Browning may be 742. It varies a little bit, but they're all 12 gauge.
Right.
Now, if for instance, if you go with the Mossberg, like the 835 Mossberg, it has a bore like a 10 gauge.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a 12 gauge, and it measures out at like 790. So it's huge.
Yeah, that's interesting, and we get that question a lot, and I've never really had a good answer for it. And I guess it's just kind of one of those things where it's just one of life's mysteries that we'll never really solve for sure, because sure would heck be a lot easier to just be able to go to the aisle and say, okay, I shoot this combo. This is the one that patterns the best. But it's obviously some ideal thinking there. But so let me ask you this, Larry. when we're talking about choke tubes, and let's just use Beretta for example, because that's what Dan and I shoot. So I get the 3 standard chokes that come with my gun, a full modified and an improved cylinder. And, I'm hunting with that and I'm doing well. And it's performing like I guess I think it should, that kind of thing. How much better of a performance should I expect when I purchase, an upgraded or an aftermarket choke or a Patternmaster choke, for example? So, if I hunt with, a modified choke that came with my gun, and then I bought, a mid-range Patternmaster choke, how much better performance should I expect to see between the two?
When you go out and you actually shoot something and it comes down, you will see with your own eyes the difference. You will see the difference where you hit it with your modified constriction choke, and he'll flutter a little bit and come down, and you hit him with that Patternmaster. I mean, it may move him through a foot. I mean, it hits them so hard when they come down.
So you're saying it's something that you would be able to visually tell.
Oh yeah.
And just kind of getting back to what you said before, the reason for that is because, the shot string impact is really what you're getting at, right? So,
Yes.
like if I take my factory modified in my Patternmaster mid range and I put it on the range, I might see similar, pattern densities at various yardages, because, your tubes aren't really designed to have an impact there. It's on the other way, not width, but the length of the shot string. So, I think that's important to know, because I think a lot of guys would take that, if they had not realized that's what they were getting into, they would go out to the range and, shoot the chokes to compare and not see much of a difference, and they might be disappointed. So I think that's a really good point to to make sure that people are aware that that's, what they should expect.
Normally our tubes would compare right along with the, like if a modified tube, and you shot our mid-range, and you'd see that it shoots on paper, about like a modified, maybe even a little tighter, and the same with a full. It would shoot on paper pretty much the same, but it's, you could, if you're shooting it against a constriction choke and then this one, and they shoot the same, and that one came with the gun, and this one here cost you money to buy an aftermarket, you'd say, well, gee, they shoot the same. Well, because you're not able to see that. On our website, we have a little film clip of Fred Zink. I don't know if you know Fred Zink.
Mm-hmm.
Heard of calls and things, you guys?
Yeah, he's sort of a name I've heard once or twice, I think.
Well, Fred does a little skit on there where he explains. He's been shooting Patternmaster for like 15 years, and he does a little filming out across water, and he just shows you what's happening there and explains every step of it. It's pretty interesting to go on there to the website and just watch that.
Yeah, I encourage everyone to go and check that out. It's pretty impressive. So, Larry, let me. You started out by talking the difference between steel and lead, and how waterfowlers are constricted to steel shot. Now, how much if a guy's coming from small game hunting or upland bird hunting and getting into waterfowl, and now they have to go from lead to steel, how much difference does the steel shot pattern than lead? And maybe go ahead and talk about Patternmaster chokes, and can you shoot lead and steel through the same chokes?
Yeah, I really couldn't tell you the big difference. I know they don't shoot nearly as well with the steel as they do with but as far as percentages, I really couldn't right off the top of my head tell you what the percentages would be, because like I said, on ammunition, on guns, it differs, but you will see a noticeable difference with the lead over the steel. And it's just the way that it is.
Yeah, I was just going to add to the second part of his question there. Can you shoot both lead and steel through the Patternmaster chokes?
Oh, definitely. definitely. They'll shoot the lead better than the steel, but actually they were designed around steel. You know, we first designed this back in the early 90s. You know, when steel was what you had to use, and it just came about, and most people were very discouraged with it. We just found a way that we could give you a better hunt. You know,
right? You've told us a lot about the types of chokes that you have and how your technology impacts the shot string and that kind of stuff. And I know you guys have patented that kind of that technology. So I'm going to make an assumption here that there's not really another choke tube in the game that can kind of parallel this type of technology at all. Is that correct?
Not the way this does.
Fair enough. So how about, for your best all around choke, general waterfowl use? I know you guys have several different, models, the original, the black, the Anaconda, the different chokes that you guys have. What's the best one for the general waterfowl use?
Well, the best with the, in the Patternmaster line or the Code Black line, for me, would either be the short range or the long range. Because I'm not one that shoots 3.5-inch shells, because that hurts on both ends.
Dan and I have talked about that a lot on this show. We're right there with you.
Multiple times. Right, and then them geese can't fly that fast anyway, so 2 3/4 and 3-inch will still bring them down. When you get the whole impact of the shot string hitting them all at once, it brings them down just like, you don't need all that extra.
So I've noticed on some tubes, and this could be just because they're more, like you talk about constriction style tubes. Do guys need to worry about the size of the shot or the speed of the ammo that they're using when they get into these aftermarket chokes and, extreme range and that kind of stuff? And I know your tubes don't constrict, but being that there is something taking place inside the choke, some of these ammos can be plussed up pretty good where you're getting, up to 1,700, feet per second on the shot at the muzzle, that kind of thing. So is there something to be concerned about there for a hunter and using, something too big and too fast as far as the gun's concerned?
For a while, I run the ballistics lab for Department of Homeland Security for a couple of years, and we did a lot of high-speed filming of different things. And I've shot high-speed ammo and, filmed the muzzle of the barrel and then shot some standard velocity and filmed that. And you'll notice when you're shooting the high velocity, as it comes out, all of that gas disperses, and just shoots out the side all over. And when you're shooting the standard velocity, you'll see most of that gas stays right behind the wad, and it just keeps pushing. So even though you're wasting a lot of that gas because you can't keep it behind there because it's, so much pressure. We, at one time we were buying, reduced recoil buckshot and slugs, and actually in gelatin with the reduced recoil, it actually penetrated farther in gelatin than the high speed stuff.
So let me ask you this question. We've done a segment on this show talking about the difference between 3-inch and 3.5-inch shells. And one of the big things that, Dan and I both shoot 3-inch, and one of the big things that this study that we referred to was felt recoil and how much, it was like a 50% gain or something like that I'm pulling from the top of my head here, if I recall, a 50% harder thump on the 3.5 versus the 3-inch. Based on what you're just telling me, it sounds like that reduced recoil that the 3-inch provides you would give you a slight benefit ballistically as far as, being able to chamber all of the gas and the explosion inside the gun, keeping your shot going in the right direction. Am I reading into that too much, or is that accurate?
I think you're accurate. I mean, you are going to get the benefit of having more BBs, with the 3.5 because of the longer wad, and it's more room for them. And so you're throwing more out there, but, it's not keeping that energy behind the wad and continuing to push, because it's trying to get out of the way everywhere it can.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that the choke tube, just the whole concept behind all of that is something for an outsider that's not familiar with how all of that works. It's an intimidating and sort of an unknown area because, like I said, I'd been on your website and I'd seen all your stuff. I just didn't realize that that there wasn't any constriction there. I guess I just sort of thought that kind of had to be part of it. Talking about the size of the pattern of the gun.
Now we do make some tubes that our Anaconda line it's a new technology we patented just a couple of years ago, and we actually do use a little bit of constriction. A regular constriction choke for a full choke would normally measure about 0.690. Our full choke with the Anaconda is 0.705. And the reason we're getting full choke patterns is because inside of the Anaconda, you notice there's a spiral that goes around in there. And what that actually is, it's a gas channel. So as the wad moves through there, it does squeeze it down just a little bit, okay? And as soon as the wad passes and exposes that spiral, it's a gas channel. That gas spins right up around that wad, and it puts like a radial brake on the wad, allowing that shot to go ahead and exit it together.
Interesting. Yeah, and I had seen the Anaconda line come out, and just the spiral is a unique thing that you don't see typically, and it was kind of new to the industry. So I do recall that kind of catching my eye and looking into that. So I mean, I think it goes without saying that Patternmaster Choke Tubes is on the front lines of research and development and sort of continuing to push the limits of what choke tubes can bring to shotgun hunters and that kind of thing. Dan, did you have anything else that you wanted to talk about with Larry before we wrap it up?
I don't know. I'm kind of jealous that I don't get to go and shoot and test it out all the time. That's for sure.
You'd be more than welcome. My shoulder gets sore after a while.
Oh, I'm sure. Well,
Larry, we appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us. We encourage all of our listeners out there to check out Patternmaster. You can find them online, as Larry's referenced a couple different times, at patternmaster.com. They're also on Facebook and the various social media platforms. So definitely encourage you all to check out their products. And Larry, again, thanks for joining us. We appreciate all the information that you've brought to the show for us here, and best of luck to you this season.
Well, I hope I answered some questions that people might have had out there.
Well, we'll send them over to the Patternmaster Facebook page, and they can, if they've got any other questions for you about your products, you've got a full staff over there that can take care of them there. So, again, Larry, appreciate your time, and let's do it again sometime.
You bet. Thank you.
So I got to be honest with you, Dan. Before our conversation with Larry, I had never really thought about how important the shot string was to a waterfowl hunter. It just makes a ton of sense when you think about it, shooting a standing target like a turkey versus a wood duck that's buzzing by your hide, and at Mach 5, and you're trying to get a good shot on it. So I think it's an interesting concept and something that I definitely need to take a look at a little bit closer with my waterfowl setup.
Yeah, and I have to say that was one of the harder interviews for me, because I was just trying to wrap my head around all the information and just thinking about the science that actually goes into the choke tubes and the differences between Patternmaster and other companies. And like you said, it gets your mind thinking a little bit, and I think that might be my next purchase. I'm not going to lie. Like, it just seems like, a shorter shot string. I mean, you want everything hitting at the same time, and the last thing you want is a cripple. And, we've talked about that. That's kind of why we go with full chokes, and, either you hit them and kill them, or it's a clean miss. And that's something that I enjoy, a good ethical kill. So if that's going to provide more of an opportunity to to kill, make a quick, clean kill. Like that's something that I'm definitely going to look into.
Yeah, and especially for guys that are hunting divers and stuff like that, you cripple a bird and it just dives, you could be chasing that bird for a while. So, doing whatever you can do to put stack the chips in your favor to make a good, clean shot is something that's definitely worth looking into. So, we'd encourage you guys to check out Patternmaster Chokes at patternmaster.com. And, you can find them on the various social networking sites as well. And, like we said, manufactured right in Pennsylvania, right in our backyard. And, we obviously enjoy promoting local companies and supporting local companies like that. So definitely give Patternmaster a look, and we appreciate Larry giving us some time and coming on the show. What do you think, Dan? Anything else that you want to cover here before we get into this week's parting shot?
I was just going to say, we talked a little bit about Larry's background, but it is quite extensive. And, he knows what he's doing. He knows what's going on. And like you said, I encourage people to go and check out what they have going. And, there is science behind the shot, and that's their slogan there. So go and check it out. And even if you shoot a different choke, go and take a look. Just see what the difference is.
All right. So this week's parting shot, before I get into it, is a special one for us at HP Outdoors. It's dealing with Veterans Day. And, this week we're celebrating Veterans Day and all of those that have served this country in various capacities and things like that. So, before we get into it, I just want to give you an opportunity, Dan, if there's anything that you wanted to, say as far as, the Veterans Day holiday that we're getting ready to observe.
Thank you. I mean, that's all. I wish I could do more. And, these guys give us the ability to do what we love. And, there's so many that we've lost, friends and family. And I mean, there's not enough time in a day to thank, just to give as much thanks as what we should to these guys and ladies out there.
Well said. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this week's parting shot. So the great patriots of this nation fired the shot heard around the world on the North Bridge, Concord, Mass., 1775. And from that day forward, the hands of fate, set forth where the men and women of the armed services of the United States of America were called upon to answer the bell time and time again. And they've done so following the attacks of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. On D-Day, June 6th, the longest day, 1944, Normandy, France. They did so again in Korea in the 1950s and again in Vietnam in the 1960s. Following the attacks of September 11th, 2001, the global war on terror has taken a toll on this nation like no other, but the men and women of our armed services and her allies have risen to the occasion time and time again. In 1776, when the Continental Congress drafted the Declaration of Independence, they knew at that time it wasn't going to be an easy situation. Elmer Davis said that this will remain the land of the free only so long as it remains the home of the brave. And he said that this republic was not established by cowards and it will not be preserved by cowards. So to all of the men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces and her allies, thank you from HP Outdoors for everything that you do. And we encourage each and every one of you out there to shake the hand of a veteran and just to say thank you. I assure you that they deserve it and they do not hear it enough. And for all of us here at HP Outdoors, I just want to say, anytime you need you want to go out for a hunt, there's always an empty spot in our blind. So again, thank you for all that you do and all that you will do. That's going to do it for this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. I'd like to thank Larry Leutenegger, CEO of Patternmaster, for joining us, and hope you guys enjoyed our profile of the mallard duck. You can check us out on hpoutdoors.com. You can also check us out on iTunes, and if you hadn't had a chance yet, please go on there and fill out a review and a rating. We are greatly appreciative of that. And if you've got any questions or concerns, reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter. You can also email us through the website, and we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can and continue the conversation. So for Dan, I'm Josh. Thanks again. Take care.